Edinburgh International Harp Festival. It's day 5 of the festival and we have another workshop for you. And our tutor today is none other than Calum Macleod. If you tuned in to last night's concert, you would have heard him both play and sing in Gaelic, and we're thrilled that he's agreed to teach a workshop for us too. Although, to be honest, he is a committee member as well now of the Harp Festival, so kind of had no choice, but he's up for it, and I have to say it's a really good workshop. He's not so much teaching you a tune, but he's talking about theory and modes, all to kind of fit in slightly with what he was going to be teaching at the festival, which was a course on looping and kind of looping with pedals. So it's the theory aspect of that, but honestly it's fascinating. So yeah, tune in. And oh, of course, this is his website or his Bandcamp. Please check that out and consider ordering his CD. Now, later this afternoon, actually, just to say as well, we don't have a 4 o'clock workshop. Instead, we have a 100 Harps play along. So if you've not got your music downloaded, head over to harpfestival.co.uk, and under the virtual Edinburgh International Harp Festival tab, you'll find the music for Tuesday's play along. Download it, have a wee practice before 4 o'clock, and then come back and you can play along with 100 harps in an arrangement of a piece written by Isabel Miras. So anyway, back to the workshop just now. Here's Calum.
Hello. This must be one of the most bizarre experiences of my life. Yes, I've been getting used to this online teaching malarkey. But it certainly feels a lot easier when I've got someone who's on the other end that I can see and help. Anyway, so this is a little bit weird, but let's give it a go. So I was meant to be teaching a course on harp looping, or using a loop pedal and other effects pedals with the harp. I thought for this session that I would focus on the musical content that I was going to be doing with that course. And this is mostly things that would help you in terms of the improvising, composing part of creating loops with the harp. But I hope a lot of this will be very beneficial and helpful to everyone who's watching. To many of my students, if you're watching, you'll probably hear things that I've said 100 times before, so maybe just skip past the first part. Anyway, so the first thing that I tend to talk about, actually I tend to talk about this a lot when I'm teaching, is the incredible and wonderful little bit of theory known as the Pentatonic Scale. Now, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to focus on the G Major Pentatonic, because that is particularly suitable for the harp, and we'll find out in just a moment why that is. So if you aren't familiar with the Pentatonic Scale, I'm having a quick think. Let's see, penta, that's Greek for 5. So we're talking about a 5-note scale that revolves around a tonic, revolves around one note. So if we take G major, for example, so a G major scale, that has 7 different notes that revolves around the tonic being G. So it's another fancy name for calling it the first degree of the scale. Now, within that G major pentatonic, if we get rid of the 4th degree, which in this case is C, and the 7th degree, which in this case is F, we're left with a G major pentatonic. We're left with 5 different notes. This is quite an interesting sound. A sound that you might well recognise from so many different sources. I certainly believe that this is the one scale that we seem to find all over the world. Whether it's as, say, over in China through to Africa, pretty much any spiritual is in a pentatonic mode. For example, Amazing Grace, entirely pentatonic, which I quite like when I'm teaching, because knowing that it's only certain notes can make it a lot easier to learn a tune. And even when I'm teaching other instruments other than harp, I still talk about pentatonic a lot because it is very helpful when you're learning tunes, and just as helpful for me teaching them. Anyway, right, the G major pentatonic and how it relates to the harp. Well, I sort of said it already, but we get rid of the fourth, which in this case is C, and the seventh, which in this case is F, and we're left with just the white strings. So you can play absolutely any white string and it will be part of the G major pentatonic. And you get this pentatonic sound. I can't really think of it how else to describe it. So we have this slightly simpler pentatonic that we can look at, in the sense that we know it's only these white strings, whereas any other pentatonic on the harp is going to involve at least one red or the black. So the G is the only pentatonic that allows us this. And this is the best one to start to improvise, to get relaxed with this instrument, knowing that as long as you play one of those notes, it will sound right. You can't really go wrong. I mean, it's brilliant. If you're learning a tune that's in a pentatonic mode, then as long as you play a note, one of the notes of that pentatonic, then it will sound kind of right. So I could play Amazing Grace. I make a few wrong notes, but as long as they're part of the pentatonic, you probably wouldn't notice. Or if you did, you just think, oh, that's a slightly different one, rather than, oh, that was the most horrible note I've ever heard. So it is a great one to start with when it comes to improvising. And when it comes to thinking up when it comes to thinking up phrases for looping, it's best to think small to begin with. And even then, even once you lengthen things, you might still come back to the smaller ones, because they do tend to sound the best and give you the most options. So we could choose 4 notes, for example. As long as they are of the 5 pentatonic notes that we have of G, of any of those white strings, choose any 4 of those, and we're going to play them again and again and again. So I might choose G, B, A, and then D, and then I'm going to play them again and again and again. Quite often when I'm teaching improvisation to my students, we'll do this kind of going around between us. So I might play 2 notes, and then they play 2 notes, and then I'll play another 2 notes, and then they'll play another 2 notes. So this is something that you can certainly do with a friend. I suppose at the moment it's only if you happen to live with another harp player. But once the lockdown is lifted, or maybe you can get on FaceTime or something to play a couple of notes and then pass them over. At least then you don't really have to play at the same time, so the latency won't be a problem. Let's not get off topic. So let's go back to those 4 notes. So we had G, B, A, D. Could play them a different octave. I could play 2 of those notes in a different octave. I could play the G and the B in one with my left hand, and the A and the D in the right hand. Lots and lots of different options. I could reverse them. I could play that D first, then the A, then the B, then the G. Okay, that maybe sounds a little bit like Big Ben or something like that. Not too sure what's in my head. So creating little repetitive phrases and building that up to something a little bit more exciting. Although I quite like the sound of that, to be honest. That could be the start of my next loop. You never know. So, trying out just little phrases. I mean, I quite like... I talk about limits when it comes to improvising. So, if I'm working on improvising, I want to give myself some sort of limit, because if you could play absolutely any note in any order, going up, going down, there's just too many possibilities. But my brain explodes way before I actually get to playing, because there's just too many options. Where do you start? So give yourself a limit. This is why I was talking about doing 2 notes each and sharing these things sort of thing with another. Well, it doesn't have to be a harp player, but another person. So a small limit, it might be 4 notes. So let's do those 4 notes again. Then I'm going to have a little breath. I'm going to play another 4 notes, and I'll have a little breath, and so on and so forth. So we'll start with the same 4. We had G, B, A, D. And gradually you'll feel more relaxed with your possibilities, and then you might start playing just 3 notes in one phrase, maybe playing 5 in the next. Maybe some notes will be a little bit faster, some notes might be a little bit slower, and you can ease yourself into improvising. I know that sounds like a very scary word, and I know a lot of people just think, oh, no, there's no possibility, there's no way that I could improvise. But hopefully you can see just how manageable the pentatonic scale can make it. I've done a few experiments with larger groups and the pentatonic. I could, within a large group, you could ask everyone to play any note of that, say that G major pentatonic. And even if every single person played a different note, we get this kind of chord, this sound. Or now, through any of those, did you think, that was absolutely horrible, don't ever do that again? I'm hoping not. And this is one of the really beautiful things about the pentatonic. So if you stick to the pentatonic when you're creating little loops, so say we had those 4 notes, so when we had that looping round and round and round, then we added another few notes. Now notice I did use a different rhythm, because we do want to add some different textures, some different sounds to these different loops. But using the pentatonic, they're always going to sound nice. They're always going to complement each other. It doesn't really matter how busy it gets. You could have a dozen different loops going on, all using slightly different rhythms, all using slightly different notes. But as long as they're part of the pentatonic, they should, so long as you've tuned properly, they should match up, and they should sound quite nice. It might sound a little bit busy, granted. So I'm not telling you to do every single loop session that you do. Yeah, have at least a dozen loops. No, I'm not saying that for 1 second at all. But it's a great thing to use that pentatonic to help. Anyway, right. So I think that's enough on the kind of improvisational part of it, which can of course become composition. There are lots of tunes that I've written over the years where I haven't sat down to do anything, but maybe I've been playing around, say, with the pentatonic or with another mode. and things have just happened naturally. So it wasn't that I was looking to write a tune, it just kind of happened. Yeah, it's those times where you sit down and think, right, I'm going to write a tune today. Nah, it doesn't happen, does it? Anyway, right, a few more things about the pentatonic and how it can benefit us in terms of looping. There are two notes there, the C and the F, which we're not playing. Now, when it comes to the harmony, well, it hasn't told us whether it should be an F sharp or an F natural, or whether it should be a C natural or a C sharp even. You know, what our loop is doing, or what our right hand is doing, is not telling us, it's not giving us that information. So we can take advantage. I'll demonstrate. Right, I'll use a tune. This one is the Lisnagan Jig by Brendan Ring. I'm sure many of you already know it. And I'll include a PDF of this, just in case you haven't come across it before. But this tune, like many others, is entirely pentatonic. I'm just going to focus on the first half, just to demonstrate. So our left hand could stay entirely within the pentatonic. Let's see if I can play around a little bit with that. Okay, so I didn't touch any note, I didn't touch any C or F in that left hand. Hopefully you don't think any of that sounded wrong. Maybe you do. But it was all within the pentatonic. So there shouldn't have been anything that sounded harsh or clashed in any way. Now, if I add the notes that we might expect, say we were playing in G major. So we've got a C natural and an F sharp. I'll do it again and add some of those notes in this time. Okay, right, you know, a few other little flavours trickling in there. But all, I think you would say, as expected. Let's play around with the F. I quite like playing around with the 7th degree when it comes to these types of tunes, because that is the difference between our normal major scale and then it's one of the major modes called the Mixolydian. It's also known as the pipe scale. If I just play the note on its own, or the scale on its own, this is the Mixolydian. So we don't have the F sharp, we've got that F natural. So if I play around with that F natural, so it's not happening in the right hand, it's not happening in the tune. So therefore, as I said, the tune isn't telling us whether it should be an F natural or an F sharp. So let's see if I can persuade you that the F natural is just as good. Okay, I cheated slightly there. I had some F naturals and some F sharps. But even then, hopefully it gives you an idea of the possibilities that the pentatonic allows. Yeah, it's quite insane really. And I know for a fact that I have not found all of its possibilities. I mean, I don't think it's possible. But that is one mode, that's one scale that I've always enjoyed playing. On the harp, these tunes tend to fit really nicely under the hand. I haven't yet come across a pentatonic tune that doesn't suit the harp. So yeah, I think maybe it is a particularly harpy thing. But as I said, all this theory is relevant to all other instruments as well. Right, okay, so I know this has really been all about the pentatonic scale, and I think 20 minutes entirely on one tiny piece of theory is maybe a little bit too much. But I'm just going to do one final demonstration just to finish up. And yeah, it's to show the different flavours that we can get. So this is a little pattern that, in fact, Scottish harpist Crony Hewitt taught me. It would have been a fair few years ago. Anyway, so it's, to begin with, it uses entirely the pentatonic. I mean, I've changed key now. I'm now onto an A flat pentatonic. Okay, so that's entirely pentatonic. I'm going to do that again, but this time I will play the third phrase, where there's a slight change. I want you to have a listen out for it. Can you hear the change in the texture and the tone? So when it gets into that third phrase, then we add the fourth. We get the fourth degree of the scale. We get that, in this case it's a D flat that we get added. So it just adds an extra little taste to that pattern. So it's really quite cool how you can maybe start off with a pentatonic and then introduce something slightly different, just to add an extra flavour to it. But it really is quite an incredible thing. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that was helpful in some way and that hasn't scrambled your brains. I know certainly there's one or two groups that I teach and I get a little bit carried away when I'm talking about certain parts of musical theory, and it's normally by the end that I'm seeing the glazed eyes and maybe the sweat's pouring down, and you just think maybe I went a little bit too far. Anyway, right. I hope you've been enjoying this virtual Edinburgh International Harp Festival. It's certainly a rather fascinating thing. When Rachel first mentioned it, I couldn't quite see, I couldn't visualise what this was going to be. But it's turned out to be quite the interesting experience. So I hope you've enjoyed it wherever you are in the world. Thank you.